Hello, everybody. It's Chloe for This One Verse. I am going live today to do a wrap up on what I read in March of this year. I know this is like a little early for a live, so I'm going to give it a few minutes to see if some people pop in. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been up to and stuff, and then I'll get into the books. Just writing in the chat. Hey, everybody. I'm going to chat about what I've been up to the past week while I wait for people to show up. I will start discussing books in about 3 minutes. Okay, so yeah, I have been a little bit infrequent with the wrap-ups. I really do want to get like up to date on the wrap-ups, but I have had some technical issues. If people were on the last live where I tried to use what is it called, OBS Streamlabs. There's nothing wrong with Streamlabs OBS. It's just like not as simple to do the things I want to do for a wrap-up. So I had to upgrade my operating system to even use OBS. So I'm like, maybe now things will work out. So I'm going to try using StreamYards again. Hey, Alicia, thanks for coming by. So that's what's been happening on the technical end, and that's why lives have been a lot less frequent, because I still haven't figured out what's going on with my iMovie. And yeah, I've just been kind of enjoying the summer. The weather's been nice. I've been trying to like get out of the house and go do stuff. And so I have been reading. It's just like the extra layer of like writing videos, scripting videos, scheduling videos just hasn't been happening. So that's why I'm going to try and do, sorry, my door is a little creaky. I'm going to try and do the wrap-ups a little bit more frequently just so I can be done, because I have, what is it? So this is March. I've got April, May, June, and July. I've got 4 months to catch up on. And so I just want them out of the way. I'm tired of it hanging over my head, so I'm going to try and do that. But in terms of, I guess, what I've been doing outside of book stuff, I've been going to the beach. Water is still kind of cold, but like it doesn't really get like comfortable for me till August, but beach has been nice. I went to the Chinese Lantern Festival yesterday with my grandma, which was fun. Hey T, thanks for coming by. And I've just been trying to like go do stuff like in the city and like hanging out with friends and stuff. And like, I don't know why it's such a process for me to do stuff like that, but like it just takes up a lot of space in my head, and that makes it harder for me to do booktube stuff. Funnily enough, at the Chinese Lantern Festival, I thought that like, because it's in like downtown, so I thought it was going to be like such a hassle finding like parking, or even like getting in. So like I did all this stuff in advance, like buying the tickets in advance. I like planned out like, okay, here's when I have to leave the house, and here's when we need to get ready to like get there like right when it opens. And so embarrassing. I planned to pick up, because I went with my grandma. I told her I was going to pick her up at 4:30, and at like 3:15, I'm getting ready to leave my house, and I just showered, and I was like doing something on the computer with the tickets, because I was also going to take my great aunt. She had to cancel, and so I was trying to see if I could like reschedule her ticket so maybe she could go some other time. And as I'm like lying on the bed out of the shower, I remember feeling like sleepy, and the next thing I know, I'm just like, I look up and I check the clock, and it's 5. And I was like, that is so embarrassing. Like on the one hand, maybe I should be worried. Like maybe it's something to do with the heat, that I like literally just like passed out and like did not mean to fall asleep. But also maybe I'm just getting old and I just like can't stay awake anymore even in the middle of the day. But it worked out, because if I'd gone according to my plan, we would have been at the Lantern Festival at 5, and it doesn't get dark till like 7. And like we probably would have missed most of this stuff, because we really only were there for like 2 hours once we actually got there. But that was a lot of fun. All these different lanterns. I wish I had done like more about the process for the lanterns. Like they have little plaques, but the plaques are just kind of like generic stuff. Like there's like a seaweed card, or like it's like all these lanterns that look like seaweed, and then the plaque is like seaweed makes this amount of our oxygen a year, and it's like, but like, you know, why do the artists make the seaweed? What's the process to like get these lanterns up? I would have liked more of that, but it was a good time. I had a lot of fun. My grandma had fun, so I'm just being nitpicky. Um, this is the first time I've gone. This is the first time my grandma has gone, which is kind of funny because she's lived in the city like pretty much her entire life. But I think it was one of those things where it's like, oh, it's like right there. You know, I'll go someday. I'll go someday, and you like look up, and it's been like, in her case, probably like 50 years, and you're like, oh, I never did that thing. So that was the first time she'd gone to the Lantern Festival. So that was like nice that we could do that. Parking in Philly always was the worst. Yeah, I hate parking in Philly. I really try to take public transit whenever I can, but with my grandma, we really it wouldn't have made sense. Like she can't really walk like a block, even is kind of pushing it. Um, so I had to drive, and it actually was okay. Like we just found a lot nearby, and I like dropped her off and picked her up. Um, but like if I was just out by myself, I would not be driving. I would be taking the bus or the trolley or something. Cause yeah, it's not too far from Chinatown. It's like if I was taking regional rail, it's like the Jefferson Station, so very walkable. But I have gone over the time I said I was gonna go to talk about my week. If people want to talk about your week in the comments, and I'll read them out. Because I think for this live, I'm gonna structure it where it's like I have the book where I give like the quick, you know, little review what I think of it, and then I'm gonna ask a question that kind of came up for me as I was reading the book for you all, and also I'll just kind of like catch up on what people said in the comments, so I can talk with you a little bit. So if you want to talk to me about like how your week has been going, if you've ever been to like a Chinese Lantern Festival before, let me know, and I'll read it after I talk about this book. So first up, I call this my month of YA because I'm really not a YA reader. I'm just like very aware that like I'm not the target demographic for YA anymore. Like I'm in my mid 20s. It's been a minute since I was in high school. And also like even when I was in high school, there's just like stuff about YA that kind of grated on me. Like I was very picky about the YA books I was reading, like especially if they had female protagonists. Um, I don't know, just something about specifically like romantic subplots and love triangles that just like really irks me. And so I just don't read a lot of YA because it seems to be kind of like not the thing, but it's like pretty prominent. Um, but there's all these like YA books that people had been like recommending to me. And it just so happened that in March I ended up reading all of them. And one of them that I read was Raybearer by Drayton and Ifueko. So believe the hype, people. This is one I think is very beloved on BookTube, and after reading it, I could see why. This is about a young girl, Tarisai, who lives in this fantasy empire. In this empire, the emperor picks like a representative from each country to live with him and basically like share this mind link with him. And these people are picked when they're very young. So like the emperor is probably like 10. All the people he's picking at the time are probably about 10. And in terms of like why they do this, well, for the people who are picked, it's like a huge like honor to be picked. Like, you know, you're pretty much set for life. But you kind of have to renounce like your family and your country, and like all your loyalty goes to the emperor. And the reason why the emperor is doing this is because it grants him immunities to a certain way of dying. So like after he like picks one person from each country that's within the empire, he's going to be immune to anything except for dying from old age, and also if one of his council kills him. That's the only way he can die. And Tarisai's mother wants her to infiltrate the council and kill the emperor. And so that's, you know, the story. It was honestly very hard to like draft up a script for this because I really don't have much to praise about that hasn't already been said better by other reviewers. Ifueko's writing is sublime. Like the imagery, the sensory details, it's all top notch. There's so much detail in like the landscapes and the food and the clothing, because there's all these different ethnic groups in the story, and the magical creatures, and it never felt like too much. Like it felt like grand and big in a way that like I really want from a fantasy where, we're in this whole new world, while also like not feeling like the details were like detracting from the story or slowing things down. Like it all felt like very atmospheric. It felt very like important part of the story to me. Um and I wished I'd been able to be more present while reading. Like at the time, I was kind of like struggling with reading, feeling kind of tapped out because I know I love fraught mother-daughter relationships. And this one would have really messed me up, I think, if I'd been able to be like present while reading. But as it was, I kind of like noted, like, oh man, like this is really good stuff. And I wish I could have enjoyed it more. Um, or maybe not even like enjoyed being the right word because it is like very abusive, but like felt the emotions because like the craft is like I said, Ifueko's writing is sublime. Like craft wise, like the setup for this relationship, us like understanding, like the just like the depravity of the mom who is only known as the lady. Like Tarzan never calls her mother. We don't really ever learn her name. But like just all the layers to how she distances Tari Sai and keeps her dependent on her is just like wild, and also just like the poignancy and desperation, I think, of Tari Sai and like wanting this relationship with a mom who's like just very uninterested in getting to know her, and a mother who has like very self-serving, very selective interest in her. And we see even more of Tari Sai's family, and like the drama and like the story behind it all is again top tier, great stuff. I really enjoyed like peeling back the layers and being like, oh man, it's not even just like the mom is like wild. It's like everybody. And I I don't know, I really just like it just felt very real, I think. Tari Sai's like emotions, and I don't know, I think there's something about wanting to have a relationship with your parent that like no matter what age you're at, you just feel this is like such a simple thing, I think, to be like, I want, a parent to love me. I want them to support me. I want them to encourage me and do X, Y, or Z. And I feel like it's very easy to remember, being like young and being a kid and like being like so dependent on your parents' approval. Um, and I think that Ifueko just like captures that perfectly because it's a pretty good time. Like we follow Tara Sai from she's like 8 to like a teenager. And you can still see that even as she like grows and matures and like becomes more independent, how like having this relationship with her mother still kind of like takes her back to being so young. Um, so the family stuff was great, very well done. I also thought, I think the relationships in general in this book were so strong. Like I love the relationships that Tari Sai develops with the other members of the council, because they all become very close. Um, but still, her relationship with each person is distinct, and there is still like angst, I guess, in these relationships. Like in theory, none of the council members are supposed to be getting married. Their only allegiance is supposed to be to the emperor. And so like if they do get married or like have kids with anyone, it's only supposed to be with the emperor. And Tari Sai has this love interest, Sanjit, who I think relates to her because he also had a father who was abusive. And also I think the ways that they dealt with that, they kind of see themselves in each other, but also like they're very different. Like they're kind of complementary. And yeah, I didn't really have much more to say about the book. I just really enjoyed it. A very solid book. If we're talking about like general topics that the book talks about, I already really went in, I think, on like abusive parents, but also talking about like patriarchy and like systems of government that disenfranchise women, and like empires in general, like how are empires maintained? What does justice look like? These are all questions that are explored in this book. So my question for you all is, what is your favorite parent-child relationship in a fantasy book? It doesn't have to be like the best relationship. It could just be like a relationship that gave you like a lot of emotions, like it's compelling. You want to revisit that saga again and again. I'd be interested to hear about that. So, okay. So I was expecting to see some people in the comments talking about their weeks, but looks like people did not. So I'll give like a few minutes for people to chime in about my question for Raybearer. And if I don't hear back, I'll just go on to my next book. I think for me, my all-time favorite is probably Essen and Nassin from the Broken Earth trilogy. I think there's a lot of layers to like the love that the mother has for her daughter, and also the ways that she's failed her daughter and is trying to um, compensate for that. That just like I guess really got me. So I think that's probably my all-time favorite. That's probably like the bar for like how much I want these how much I want to feel when like I read about like these types of relationships. Um I think also I think my second favorite is probably going to be Sarge and Phoenix from Joplin's Ghost by Tanana Reeve Dew. I think that one's a little bit more straightforward in that like it's a father-daughter relationship, and the dad's pretty much always made it a point to be in Phoenix's life because he wasn't able to have that relationship with his other children. But there is still kind of a tension and disagreement in terms of like how the father and the daughter want, her career to go, and like how like she, I guess, handles her romantic situations and um, things like that. So I enjoyed that one too. Alicia says, I really like the relationship in Amari and the Knight brothers, not just the parent relationship with the siblings as well. That was a good one. I forget the name of Amari's older brother, but yeah, Amari just really does think the world of her older brother. Is going to move heaven and earth to figure out what happened to him after he disappears. So I could see why you like that one so much. Oh, you're reading the first season for the first time? I hope you enjoy it. I really liked it. I think it's a solid book. I highly recommend it. So yeah, awesome. So next up, I read, let me find the screen so I can share it. I read a book called Brookwater's Curse by Stephen Van Patten. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. I think it's going to be what it's going to be. So this one is about this like black vampire who's created during I forget where it takes place, but he's created during like slavery in the United States. And it's about how he kind of like, I guess, butts up against this like vampire order and stuff happens. Like the summary I'm giving is not great, and that's because I didn't finish the book. I honestly read this like late last year. My library had it through Libby, I think. And I had been looking for black vampire books at the time. I heard of this one. And I could tell from the summary this was going to be very actiony, which I'm normally not big on action stories. I feel like sometimes, in general, they don't really hold my interest because it can feel like a list of actions and not necessarily like a story. Like I feel like it's easy for me to get emotionally checked out from those types of stories. But I read a short from him in Slay, which was Tales of the Vampire Noir, edited by Nicole Gibbons Kurtz. It's a black vampire short story collection. And I really enjoyed his short there, and so I thought I'd give this book a try. And I got maybe like a third of the way in and didn't finish it. I kept thinking like, I have it from my library. It's a pretty short book. I should just finish it. And in March, I was just kind of like, I'm going to put the kibosh on this. I don't feel the need to finish this book. Like I will give Patten props because I think this was something he wrote pretty early in his career. And the short I read was like more recent. And so I feel like he's grown a lot as an author in that time. But for me, this just felt like silly and like not in like a fun way. Like it felt like it was trying to be very serious. I just couldn't take it as serious as I think the story wanted me to. So part of it is that there's like this, part of it was like completely irrational. Like there's a group of the vampires who are like involved in the FBI or like the CIA or like, it's supposed to be like cool, tough guys because they work in this government agency. And I just, for whatever reason, I'm just like not big on stories where it's like the FBI or the CIA or the cop is the protagonist. It's just like, it doesn't move me. So that was just like one thing where it was kind of like just not based on anything with the story. It's just like a personal preference thing. But then in terms of the story itself, I felt like the characterization was like over the top. Like, when bad things happened, they were so bad, it was almost like comedic, and then people would like super overcompensate. So it just felt almost cartoony on that part. And then there's just some things in terms of the story that like seemed like out of place to me. Like there's this one bit where he's a human and then he gets mauled by a vampire, and that's how he turns. And for some reason, like during this mauling, we're told that the vampire who turned him like chewed off his left nipple. And like this got mentioned at least twice. It was specifically the left nipple that he's missing. And like in the little bit that I read, and I was kind of like, this is a lot. Like I just wasn't sold on the story. So I was like, I'm gonna just like drop this and I'm gonna read something else. So unfortunately didn't care for this book. And for my question for this one is are there any like tropes or like things that you irrationally dislike in a story? Like not necessarily like based in like really anything. You're just kind of like, when you see this thing, you kind of check out of the story. He says story over action every time. Yeah, I don't know. It might just be like my reading tastes that I like emotional stories. Like I like family sagas. Like I can do stuff that feels slower if I like really feel the emotions behind it. But with action stuff, I feel like sometimes it's just like I can watch an action movie. Like action movies for me are fun because I'm not doing the work of reading them, like they play out at their own pace. And I can watch like the details with like the stunt people or like the like camera angles and stuff like that and appreciate that type of stuff. But in a book, it can be like I feel like it can like slow down stuff, especially if I feel like you can slow down the story if people have to describe like every single action. If the fight scenes can feel too slow. And sometimes the cool stuff I feel like doesn't really work as well on paper as if I were to like watch it on the screen. I don't know if that makes any sense. But like I'm trying to think of an action movie I watched that I like I don't know, like something like Birds of Prey, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like I have my favorite fight scenes that I have like I've written the timestamps down, I'll rewatch them over and over again. But like I don't know if I would be able to read those if there was like a book adaptation, if that makes sense. Like I really like, was it Ruin of Shadows by L.D. Lewis, which has like a lot of fight scenes, but also there's a lot of interesting stuff happening with how it's written, like the prose. And I feel like there is still like that emotional angle there, even though it's very short. And it really is just like fight scene after fight scene. Like that's kind of the whole setup of Ruin of Shadows. So I feel like it can happen where there's a book that I like, but in general, I think I'm like a lot pickier about action books than I might be about other types of books. So that was Brookwater's Curse. I'm not seeing too many comments, so I'm going to move on to the final book I read in March, which was Bitter by Akwaeke Emezi. So unfortunately, I really enjoyed Pet. Oh, okay, wait. Sorry, I just saw T had a comment. Constant stupid decisions and lack of self-preservation make me check out. Yeah. I feel like if it's like a young character, I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. Some of the stuff makes sense. But sometimes it's just like this doesn't like even the time crunch that you're under, why are you doing these things? And especially if you like don't value your safety. I'm like, what is this? What is this? Um like I feel like there has to be a reason. Like I don't know. Boneheaded characters bother me as well. Um so I get that too. So final book I read was Bitter by Akwaeke Emezi. Um, and I say unfortunately I read Pet because I really liked Pet, but that was one of those books where like I think I mentioned it in a wrap up and was like, I love it so much I'm gonna do a standalone review. And it's probably been 2 years at this point, and standalone review has not happened. So people don't know, I guess, the depths of my love for Pet, but I like adored Pet. I was like, um, 5-star read, would love to see more YA doing stuff like this narratively, like taking risks and like kind of being more creative. Um, and so I had high expectations for Bitter. Bitter is a prequel to Pet. So Pet is set in this utopia called Lucille. Like there doesn't really explain how the government works with stuff, but like basically racism's done. There aren't cops. There are sort of still prisons, but they're called something else. Um, Basically all the problems of the world have been solved allegedly, until this like supernatural creature named Pet shows up and it's like the problems haven't been solved. There are monsters that are still lurking the streets of Lucille. Um, and the book Pet is named after the supernatural being who shows up. But the protagonist of that one is a girl named Jam. And this book, Bitter, follows Jam's mother. Like in Pet, it was mentioned kind of offhand that, well, let me backtrack. So Jam summoned Pet by accidentally cutting herself over this like piece of artwork she had made. And when that happens and Pet manifests, Bitter is like, oh gosh, like this hasn't happened for years. Like kind of offhandedly mentions that something similar had happened to her in her youth. And so this book is following Bitter in her youth, and I guess the first time the angels showed up. So Bitter at this time is like in her early teens. She's an artist who was, I think, either abandoned by her family or her family's abusive and she left them. And she's enrolled in this charter school for artistic youths who basically otherwise would not have the opportunity to like attend art school. And at the time, there's a lot of social unrest, a lot of protests around police brutality and stuff. And specifically, there's this like billionaire, something Theron. I don't remember his name. I want to say his first name was Ed, but like so all this money, and he kind of like runs Lucille like behind the scenes. But you know, people can't afford housing. The cops are harassing people and killing people, and so Theron's name is pretty much mud to most people in this book. And it's about how Bitter met her husband. I think Aloe was her husband, and so it's about how they met, and also about how Bitter feels about like protests and revolution, and it's about the creation of Lucille that we see in Pet. So this one was I'm sorry, 1 second. My door is creaking and it's bothering me. I'm gonna go shut it real quick. Hey Kay, thanks for coming by. So I'm about to get into Bitter. So this was like a really nice reading experience for me because I had mentioned that I had been kind of checked out when I was reading like Raybearer and stuff, and so I felt like I wasn't able to like appreciate stuff as much. But it felt like by the time I like sat down and got into Bitter, I was kind of in like a better space for like reading and enjoying stuff. And so it was like really easy to get through this book. I feel like I breezed through it in like a day or two on the train to work. So I enjoyed it a lot, but I did like Pet better. I feel like that's hard with books in a series, is that there's always like the comparison. I think that in general, prequels are hard because you kind of already know like what the end goal is because you know where things end. Um, but you still have to keep the stakes, you have to keep things interesting, you have to keep people engaged and bring in new stuff. And in terms of this book, for me, one of my favorite parts about Pet was like the angels. Like Pet is such a central character. We interact with Pet a lot. And I felt like here the angels show up, and when they show up, they're awesome. But like they're scary. How they speak is like threatening and also like unfamiliar and very distinct to them. Like you can tell when an angel is speaking. But this book also felt more human centric. Like it felt like it was really more about Bitter and like what she's doing with her and her relationships with like her friends and the people around her. And so the angels show up, but it felt like more sporadic. So I think that's also part of why I didn't like this one quite as much. The charter school that she's at has a headmistress named Miss Virtue. And I think it's pretty obvious that there's something up with Miss Virtue. There's like a twist towards the end about her that I called because I felt like it was very obvious. But I think that's all I'll say about that. I think that Bitter's issues felt very relatable to me. She feels like very disengaged from the protests because, you know, she's watching people getting beat up by cops and being like hospitalized. And she's like talking to people older than her who have seen similar things happen. She feels kind of hopeless and disengaged. Like she feels like, what's the point of doing stuff if, you know, you just end up hurt and nothing changes? I'd rather the people I love be safe. And I think that's something that feels real. And I think she's also trying to grapple with what's her role in these things because she really can't do protests. She tries to go to one and has like pretty much a panic attack and has to like turn around and go home. And her trying to figure out like how can she help if like it seems like the protests are like the most visible part and she's not sure that that's something that she can do. So I think that those elements are probably relatable to a lot of youth today, unfortunately. And I thought that was very well done. Theron's an interesting villain because we never meet him. Like he controls so much of the story. But like everything we know is hearsay. Like I don't think any of the characters have personally met him. Like they might have seen him on TV or stuff, but like there's no, you know, villain monologue. There's really nothing like that. There's no backstory on him. Everything we know about him comes through stories that people know of like the decisions he's made, the impact that's had on people's lives. And I think that was kind of a unique approach for this book. And I think it made a lot of sense because I think one of the big points of this story, I mean, Emezi says pretty upfront that I don't know if it's even Emezi. I'm trying to like remember who says it in this story, but at one point in the story, a character says pretty upfront that like billionaires shouldn't exist. Like they hoard all this wealth, and like here are all these people in this town who, you know, do work to keep the town running and stable, and like they don't see very many of the benefits of it. Like they can't afford housing or barely afford housing. And there's this guy who's making all this money, and how does he benefit us? How does he like benefit this town? And I think there was like a larger point here that Theron isn't the villain of the story because he's uniquely this bad person. It's just that like the position he has should not exist. Like there's not a point in like plumbing the depths of his psyche or getting to know a whole lot about him, because really no one should have the amount of power that he does. It's just dangerous. So I thought that was a very unique approach to the story. I think it made sense given, you know, this theme in the story. Trying to think, was there anything else I need to say about him? Yeah, I mean, I think it worked for me. I could see some people thinking it felt like cartoony or flat, but I feel like there wasn't a whole lot we needed to know about him. Like, I feel like his actions and decisions he made kind of spoke for themselves, in that he's here to make money and he's just going to do whatever is easiest for him to make money. So if people get hurt along the way, he doesn't much care. In terms of the story itself, we do see a few people who show up in Pet later, which was interesting. So I already mentioned that we see Bitter and Aloe, who are the parents in Pet, but Ube, who was the librarian in Pet, who's kind of like a passing mentor figure, shows up here, and we see what he was like in his youth. He's like this medic, and he's friend. Him and Bitter aren't really friends, but I think they develop a relationship over the course of the book. And we also see Hibiscus in passing, who's kind of a character who's also shows up in passing in Pet. So it's interesting to kind of see everyone as kids and trying to like figure out like, you know, were they always like the way that they were when we see them in Pet? Have they like changed? Like, why is that? So that type of stuff was interesting. I wasn't sure how I felt about the ending. The main, I guess, plot point in the story is that at some point, after I think one of Bitter's friend's eyes gets shot out by a cop, she makes this painting. She's just like really upset. She's really angry. She's like, I want them to pay. And she makes this painting, and from the painting springs an angel. And the angels show up and are basically like, we're going to kill all the monsters. And Bitter's like, I didn't want to kill anyone. That's not what I wanted. I need to figure out a way to like talk to these angels and contain them and get them to stop. And I thought that was like very interesting that a character who really had not been involved with like, you know, the organizers who are trying to put a stop to things. Let me backtrack. So basically the organizers who have been like putting in a lot of work trying to understand the situation and meet people's needs are not the people who end up really shaping Lucille. Really, the Lucille that we see in Pet was made possible by like one person who kind of wasn't really involved, in a very spur of the moment thing kickstarted all of this, which I thought was very interesting. I still don't know what I think about it or how I feel about it. I just feel like it's meaningful. I haven't really like figured out why it feels meaningful yet, if that makes sense. But for me, the ending felt a little anticlimactic because it felt like they kind of oopsied their way into the Lucille that we see in Pet, which I guess that's just kind of how stuff happens, honestly. Truthfully, like sometimes things don't happen just because of like persistence or like knowledge or things like that. Sometimes it's just like an accident happens and causes this result that sticks and you get something today. Like I don't know like how people found out about penicillin or something, but from a story perspective, it was a little anticlimactic for me. And in general, I would have liked more discussion on like tactics in the book, because the angels show up and they're like, we're going to kill all the monsters. And Bitter is like, I don't want that, which I thought made a lot of sense for her character, because I feel like making that type of judgment list in general, that's like a huge responsibility. That's not a judgment I would want to have to make. and like life or death situations. It's like not a judgment I want to have to make. And so to me, it made sense that she like did this thing like on a spur of the moment occasion. Was like, I take it back. Like, I don't want this. Um, and then there's kind of like this schism that develops in the organizers, who there are like adults around who like mentor and stuff, but it is mostly like people Bitter's age. And there's this divide that comes up between people who want to work with the angels, um, basically to kill certain people in this town. And then the people who are like, no, that's not what we want to do. And I kind of wanted more specificity on like tactics and like, I guess, the vision of this organization in general. Um, because I wasn't really sure what their line was on violence. Like, it seemed like they'd been doing peaceful protests for a while, but also like when there's a point where like people show up in one of the organizers' safe house and like everyone has like machetes on them. So it seems like they're not like completely opposed to violence because they are armed. And I just kind of wanted more details on like, okay, what was the line in the sand and why was that the line in the sand? Um, I guess just because I feel like it's something that is a little like lacking, I think, in a lot of the like fantasy books I've read about revolutions. Like, this is a book from a traditional publisher. Like, I don't expect, and this is a book that, unlike a lot of fantasy books, is set in something like very close to our world. Like, I don't expect them to glorify killing this billionaire in the story. But I was wondering more like, how did you arrive at the decisions that you arrived at, like individually and collectively, I guess. Because I don't know, it makes me think, I guess, of like Black Panther with like Killmonger and T'Challa, where it's kind of like this person is the villain because they chose to use violence, and this person is the protagonist because that's not what they're gonna do. And there is a lot of discussion around, I guess, when and why violence is used. Because like, I don't know, I guess if we're talking about like how I said earlier, how I'm not big on stories like FBI agents or CIA agents or cops or things like that. If that was a protagonist of a story, it's generally pretty okay for them to do violence. Like, what is it, like I feel like that's just like a lot of, movies is like, I mean, I guess if we're talking like war movies, it's like the US military going and doing violence outside the country. I can't name too many cop movies off the top of my head 'cause I don't watch them, but like I feel like it's pretty much like road. I mean, hunting down criminals, that is like its own like thing, I guess, of movies. But then there's also like rogue cops who are like, these cops aren't copping like they should, so I'm gonna go, grab the stockpile of weapons and then go do justice. So like, it's kind of clear in media that there are like certain types of violence and certain people that can do violence in stories, and it's like glorified. It's pretty easy to cast them as the hero and have it be a big budget thing. And then there's just like the violence where it's like off the table. And I kind of would like more frank discussions on when and why that happens, like from a story perspective. Like, I don't know, like if you have to manage like your appearance and stuff like that, can we talk about that? Like, I don't know. For me, it's less, I don't know. For me, I feel like there's something interesting about like the specifics about how people make these decisions. Like in terms of like the actual like characters in the story, how that came about. And I feel like when it just kind of jumps to like, okay, these people are using violence, so they're bad, and these people are non-violent, so they're good. It just feels like a lot of things are missed, and it feels like a lot of tension goes out the window. Like it feels like it falls into like a trope. Like you're supposed to just like see these things and recognize them. And I feel like it could be interesting to explore why, what is it? What is the particulars about this situation where it's like, this is why nonviolence is the right thing for here. It's just something I've been thinking about in general. And I think that this story for me, because it seemed like it was going to focus on organizing a lot, was something I was just interested in. Like, how did they choose these tactics in the story? And I wanted it to feel, I guess, more intentional how they got to the Lucille that they got. But I mean, the story is what it is. It's a good one. I recommend reading it. And I think that this one just, I didn't like it as much as Pet. And so it like suffered a little bit for comparison for me. But I think that is what it is. I think it just happens sometimes. I'm curious for you, is there a prequel you liked more than the original book, or for you, do you pretty much always like the originals more than the prequels, is my thought. So I'm going to go look through the comments now, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit. T. Morgan says Pet was beautifully written. I agree. Like, I think even like aside from like the messages and the like just like the warm feelings I got from like how the people in this community treat each other and operated, I thought that the prose was beautiful. Like that was something I liked because I hadn't really seen prose like that in a lot of YA books. Like I thought it was like descriptive and quick. Like I don't think it was like going to be too dense for teen readers, but it just felt different, like the cadence of it and stuff. And so that was something that I was really excited about. And then Alicia says, I want to read Pet. Do you think I need to read Bitter first? I mean, Pet was published before Bitter, so I think it stands on its own. I think that it's like kind of interesting to see what happens by reading Bitter, but like I don't think you miss out on anything if you read Pet before Bitter. Yeah, I don't think that it really. Yeah, no, I think they both kind of stand on their own, honestly. Like they inform each other, but they're also separate stories, and I think you can start either of them from either place. Sammy says, true. Publishing companies and school boards have a lot of influence on stories told to people of color, especially kids. Yeah. Like also, this was a YA book. Like there are just like limits on like the discussions that are going to happen in a young adult book, because I think young adult and children's books are seen as more like teaching tools as well. It's supposed to be like a lesson, I think, in some ways, in a way that I think doesn't really exist for adults. I don't know. Like for adult books, there's like stuff like Grimdark or things where it's like very gritty and violent and like a lot of like amoral characters and stuff. And it's kind of like understood that you're an adult and you can make these decisions for yourself. But like, I don't know if there's really like an equivalent of that genre for like young adult or middle grade. I mean, I also wasn't reading those books as a kid, so I'm probably not super knowledgeable about it too. Like the closest I could think would be A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, where it's kind of like the adults in that book were so useless who are tasked to take care of these kids. And there's really nothing the kids can do to like take care of themselves and the people that they care about. It's a very bleak series. But like that is one series. Like I don't know if in general that's like a bigger thing for children. But again, like I said, that also wasn't my thing when I was a kid. So there could be more stuff out there and I'm just missing it. T. Morgan says, sometimes a book stands on its own. Second books aren't needed. Yeah. Like do I feel like Bitter doesn't need to exist? I guess is a question I'm asking myself. Like, I think it was an interesting book, but like, yeah, I don't know if it really didn't capture me in the same way that Pet did. Even as I recognized I was doing things well and things that were very interesting, there's something about it that emotionally felt flatter to me than Pet. Like I didn't feel stale. Like I didn't feel like it was just like a bunch of old information that like I felt like it was building on the world, but yeah, there's something about it that felt like off to me. I can't really explain it. Alicia says, I like the book A Curse So Dark and Lonely. which is the first in the trilogy. And the second one wasn't bad, but followed different characters and it kind of was destroyed. I feel like those like POV jumps in a series can be kind of hard to do because I feel like if you start the first book and you really like the characters, you just want to stay with those characters. You don't want to meet new people necessarily, or like be in their heads if there's like this one narrating character that you really like. So I could see how that could tank a series. He says, in general, I don't really like series. I get that. I'm definitely someone who's like more of a standalone person. Like, I feel like if the series isn't completed when I start reading the series, there's no guarantee I'm going to read it in a timely manner. Like, I might read the first book and be like, that was fun. The second book comes out, I'm just like, it wasn't available when I was like in the reading groove. So it's just not going to happen for like a few years. Kay says, I agree. Some books are better as standalones. That's how I feel about Ashes of Gold. Wings of Ebony could have been the end. I haven't read Ashes of Gold, so I was kind of like, on Wings of Ebony. Like, that was one where I was like, interesting stuff is happening here, but like, I'm not the target audience for this, and this is fun. That's okay. That was a series I felt like I was too old to be reading for different reasons. Trying to remember where it ended. Yeah, I mean, from what I remember, Wings of Ebony, I was like, I don't know how they're going to continue this series, honestly. Just in terms of like, this is again YA trad pub. Like, I don't really know where you're going to go from here. And like raise the stakes, and I guess feel true to like what you've set up in this book. Yeah. So I haven't read the series in general, but I could see how like that could be an issue for the series going forward. I love book series, but a lot of modern ones seem disjointed, or the authors rush the story, forget the plot of book one. Like, I honestly haven't read a lot of recent series, for reasons I said a little earlier. Like, I kind of forget about them once I read the first book. Like, I finished the Raybearer series because that's only 2 books, and that one, the second book, I thought could have been split into 2 books, or some of the subplots could have been lost because it just felt like it was trying to do so much that we didn't really spend time doing what the second book introduced itself as what it was trying to do. So that one wasn't super fulfilling for me, but also I'm not a YA reader, so that could be something as well. I'm trying to think of any adult series I've read. I haven't read an adult series in a minute, actually. Hey, Erica. Thanks for joining. I'm about to wrap up soon. Yeah, but like I haven't read an adult series in a minute. Like, I started The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke and finished it. And that's one that's going to be a series, and like I'm kind of hesitant to read more of the books. Like, I'm really honestly, even if the reviews are good for the next books, I might just not read it. Like, that was a book where I was like, I read it and I think this is going to go somewhere that I'm not. I read it, it was good. I think this is going to go somewhere I'm not interested in going. And I think that's fine. I think this is where we part ways. And that was one where like the issues I had with the book, I was kind of the only one I saw saying those issues. Like, I generally just heard rave reviews about the book. And so I think it's one of those cases where it's like people, I don't seem to have other reviewers who have similar tastes to me for that book. So it's like, if I experience it, I'm just going to be, I'm really not going to know, what the experience is going to be like for me until I read it for myself. But yeah, I haven't, adult is really my home, and I really have not read an adult series in a very long time. I'm very I really like the standalones. Like all the adult series I can name right now are N.K. Jemisin stuff, and that was like completed by the time I picked them up. I mean, there was The City We Became, which is getting a sequel. I think in November it's coming out, and it's so weird because like I'm planning on reading the sequel because it's N.K. Jemisin, but I'm also like I'm not pumped about it, you know? And it's not even like I disliked the first one. I was just I don't know. Things about it felt like it was good, but it wasn't like it wasn't just wasn't gripping me the way I wanted it to grip me. And so like it looks like the second book is gonna do more stuff that like is gonna be really interesting, but it's just hard for me to, I guess, get excited about it. Like I feel like I'm gonna pick it up and read it, but I probably, unless I'm like buddy reading with someone, which I might be doing, I'm not necessarily a person who's gonna like go out and like buy it the day it comes out and like read it immediately. Like I don't have that like urge to finish the series, I guess. I don't know what it is. Alicia says it's hard because a lot of books are made into series even if they don't need to be. Yeah. Um I like the standalones and it feels like people want trilogies out of everything. And I'm like, no, please, no. Don't do this to me. Kay says, "Of this is of Wings of Ebony." Ended on a semi cliffhanger, but the second book was not good until the 80% mark. I only finished because I was buddy reading it. Yeah, I can't wait that long for books to get good. Like honestly, I'm very okay DNFing at like a third in, possibly less. Erica said, "I can't read series until they're completed. I hate waiting." I know there are people like this, and like I'll. It's not even that I hate waiting. I'm just like I forget about it. Like I'm kind of like it's weird because I don't write fic right now, but like I guess for me, I kind of feel like I'll just make up something in my head about what I think happens next, and I'm like, okay, that was satisfying, and like, I don't need the author to weigh in at this point. I don't know. It's weird. Or I'm just like, maybe it's just because like in general, I'm so comfortable like not knowing stuff. Like I'll be like, I don't understand how this works, and sometimes I'm just like, I don't understand how it works, so I'm not gonna think about it. Like it's not causing an issue, so I'm gonna go on. And maybe like that mentality is why. I don't know. I'm a strange person. I don't know what it is, truthfully. Alicia says, I did not like The Unbroken, but I don't say anything because a lot of people said something to me on Twitter about not liking it. I feel like I'm sorry that people are being weird on Twitter about it. Like for me specifically, I have a review up where I talk about it, but like the romance was just not working for me. Like how it was marketed, people were really hyping up the romantic elements, and I, not having read the book, parroted some of those talking points on Twitter, which I should not have. As I read the book, it was just like the power dynamic between those two characters, like the imbalance was just so steep. I was like, this isn't like fun romantic content for me. This is like honestly like a little scary reading this. It very much put me on edge. And so the way people are like, oh, this is like swoony romance. I'm like, this is a very interesting exploration of like how colonialism affects desire and stuff like that. But like for me, this isn't like fun romance subplot. And to me, it just felt like so real in a way that was like very stressful. Like I was like, people think this is fun, and like this is not fun. Like maybe we were just, if there are other people who are like, oh yeah, this wasn't like fun, but this is interesting, I would have felt more prepared for it. But I just felt so caught off guard that I wasn't really feeling that part. And the possibility of them being endgame, I guess, could happen with how things have changed in the book. But I was just like, it's stressing me out. It's just too stressful. I can't read any more of the series. Kay says, mystery seems to be the best in some sci-fi. One series I'm excited about is The Son of the Storm. I still haven't read The Son of the Storm, which is bad because I really enjoyed David Mogo Godhunter by this author. So the author's name is Sui Davies Okunboa, and I think his debut was David Mogo Godhunter, which is a fantasy action book that I really enjoyed. Um, it's about this guy who's half god. He's living in Lagos in Nigeria, and he has like a job catching godlings by day. So like the gods world and our world kind of like blended together. It's kind of causing some issues, and basically godlings kind of pop up almost like pest infestations, and his job is kind of like shoo them away. Um, and basically one day he gets like a offer to catch a god that is like very dangerous, and like he also kind of can't refuse because of the money behind it, and it's about what happens after that. And so I really like Okunbowa's writing, and I've liked the short stories I've read from him, but I still haven't read Son of the Storm. And I didn't realize it was going to be a series. And I'm trying to I feel like mysteries could work out if they're like kind of like standalone type deals, where it's just like, oh, I like these characters and I'm coming back to them, as opposed to like an overarching plot with some of the fantasies. It's been a while since I've read a sci-fi series. Like the only one I could think of would be Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayton, and I think it's called a Symbiosis Duology or something like that. And I really liked the first one, but I don't think Drayton was initially planning to make a sequel, and I feel like that I felt it in the second book. Um, so I feel like I'm just opposed to series, is what I'm finding out about myself. I'm like, if you can't do it in one book, you can't do it at all. Unless you're Uncaged Emerson, then you can just write all the series. I'm gonna read them regardless. I'm not trying to steer people away from the Symbiosis series by any means. Like it's still like a good, interesting series. But I don't know if I've like read a series in a while where I'm like, oh, this is cohesive. Like I feel like it's really built on each book in a very interesting way. I think I'm just someone who prefers standalones. Leisha says, in terms of what people are saying on Twitter, wasn't my place to say anything when I put my review. Was the book wasn't for me. Open to seeing what else the author writes. I really like Clark's short stories. And I know I mean, we already said Unbroken's a series, so it's getting a sequel. I don't know if they're planning to write any novels once the series is complete. But yeah, I feel like Clark's writing is solid. I just was not feeling that story. I don't know if I want to weigh in on what people were saying on Twitter. I don't know, because I feel like Twitter is an interesting place when it comes to reviewing books critically, where it's like, okay, you can't speak on something unless you're from a specific identity. But then if you're in that identity, you're also not supposed to say critical stuff, because you're supposed to just like support the author because representation. So I don't know. I just hope that large groups of people on Twitter don't notice my critical reviews, because I don't feel like dealing with that. Yeah. Alicia says, I'll be listening to Son of the Storm today. Just got it from my library. I don't know when I'm gonna read that one. I've been saying I'm gonna read it for like a year, and here we are. It's been a year. I haven't read it. I'm truly slacking. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like also it's difficult with critical reviews in general, because there are definitely books where I read them and I'm like, I don't want to like get in the way of this author making money, especially if the author is like not from the US and they're publishing stuff. Right. Like I don't want to just like stamp on their career. And it's also like, I don't know how to explain it. Like I'm aware when I read books outside of like the stuff I'm used to, like cultural wise, there's stuff I could be missing. And also sometimes I wish there was a way to just be like, this is what I think, and like make your own opinion about this stuff, like knowing that like I don't know a whole lot about this stuff. And also sometimes I'm just worried like that's just too much to do, you know, with the internet that we have today. Um, I guess how algorithms function where they really like thrive on like conflict and like dunking on people. If it's just kind of like better to be like just not say the criticism sometimes. I don't know. Yeah. 'Cause, like even for me reading other black authors who are just like in countries outside of the United States, I'm like, this is something that I don't know much about. And it would be very difficult for me to educate myself via Google. I'm realizing that there are things that it's like not a quick Google search for certain things. Like I need to know more to even know what's the right terms to throw into Google to get results that are going to be helpful to me. Um, and so like sometimes I'm kind of like I don't really know what to say, so I don't say things at all. And then sometimes I feel bad that like maybe I'm just like leading people to reading stuff like unawares, like not prepping them for what could be coming. Um, and then sometimes I'm like, this is just so. I'm one person who does this as a hobby. These are issues that are so big and so beyond me, right? Like there's so many ways that like traditional publishing could be supporting people with like reviews or publishing people outside the United States or like ways to build infrastructure for these authors so they're not relying on reviewers like me who don't know a whole lot about the cultural background for their stuff. Um, so yeah, I don't really know how to navigate that sometimes, truthfully. T. Morgan says, Kay says, wow, some folks getting into his about their favorite authors. For sure. It's interesting though, because I didn't really realize that Clark had that type of following because I feel like they're so new. Like they've been doing short stories for a while and they've been publishing for a while, but those don't seem to, get like Twitter following like that. So I'm kind of surprised that something like their book generated, I guess, that much Twitter stuff, but I guess it's also like hard to gauge, I'm not like I very much curate what I look at on Twitter. Because there's a lot of stuff that stresses me out that I just don't want to see. Um and also like like things that aren't like a lot on a Twitter scale feel a lot on a personal level. Like if I were to get like 100 likes or 100 comments on anything I posted, that's not a lot on like a Twitter level. Like that's very little. But on a personal level, where I'm used to getting like 5 likes on something I post a day, that's like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. Like this is a lot. Like I'm gonna mute this. So just navigating the internet is interesting. T's like standalone club. Yeah, for sure. Except the Broken Earth trilogy. Yeah. I think I think I just have to make peace with the fact that I'm not a series person. And so anytime a series pops up, I'm gonna be like, you should have done it in one. Kay says they want you to blindly support and shut up. I don't speak about certain books on Twitter because I know some authors are with the mess and will subtweet. Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. Yep. I don't think there's any author I've avoided saying critical things about their stuff because of their Twitter following. Just because I don't tag authors in their stuff. Like I'm very surprised anytime an author like interacts with anything I've posted about what they've written. Because I'm not really like friendly with most of the people that whose stuff I review. Um, but yeah, it can get messy when people do stuff, when authors especially do stuff like that, especially when stuff gets taken out of context and twisted. Um, it can get very, very messy. Okay, says I feel you on that. Sometimes I'll just give the 1 to 3 star review and not mention anything. It's gotta be super terrible for me to speak up. Yeah, and I think also for me, just as like a hobbyist, like I just want to talk about stuff that I like, like if a book like really I was really amped to read and I was really enjoying it, like that's what I want to talk about. Like that's like what makes me happiest is finding stuff I like and talking about with people who like it too. Um I mean, I think there's always things I'm gonna like nitpick or critique about things that I enjoy, but like I feel like sometimes that just takes up more time in my videos because that's easier for me, I guess. Like for me, it's really hard to come up with creative ways to say I like the book. Like for me, when I like the book, I'm like, it was perfect. Like I don't have things to say. It's hard for me to list out all the ways that it's perfect and like what it's doing and stuff like that. So I feel like sometimes just like even looking at the time I spend talking about things I don't like, sometimes I feel like I do spend too much time talking about things I don't like. Um, but also, I don't know. I'm very easily distracted right now. But yeah, I get the urge to just be like, this is what I thought of it. I'm gonna put it here in my personal thing so I know that I don't care for this book or this author and I don't need to read more of that. And then I'm just gonna go about my merry way. Um, yeah. It just says I barely put anything on Twitter anymore. Yeah, I get that. Like I get very, I don't know. No one's been rude to me on Twitter, but that's a lie. People will say things in a way that like maybe if they were saying it in person, I wouldn't feel away, but the way they say it on Twitter, I'm kind of like, so I have gotten people like that in my mentions, and I'm kind of like, if there's a way I can minimize people like this popping up, I would definitely do it. So I can understand why you don't use Twitter too much anymore. So that was all I was going to talk about today. And I feel like we had a pretty good after discussion chat. So I think I'm going to leave you guys to enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I hope the weather by you is not too bad. I hope it's like not super hot or anything like that. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and take care, everybody. Thanks for stopping by and talking with me. Goodbye.